Hello learners. We have been talking about environmental economics with respect to the definition, its concepts. Then we also talked about sustainability and sustainable development. In the previous two lectures, we have explained the Pareto optimality, a condition which explains that how resources can be allocated efficiently if the markets are efficient, or what role do the markets play in the efficient allocation of resources, whether it is for production or it is for the purpose of consumption. In this particular lecture, we will be talking about a new concept which is called as market failure. And this is a very, very important concept going further as we delve deeper into environmental economics. Let us have a look at what are going to be the learning objectives of this lecture. We will be today, first of all, defining the concept of market failure, and then in this lecture, we will identify the sources because of which market failure occurs. So let us see what is market failure. We have seen that Pareto optimality conditions say that there is allocative efficiency of the market if the resources are distributed or redistributed in such a way that we are able to make someone better off without making anyone worse off. However, what happens is, due to various market imperfections, these conditions which are there in Pareto optimality lead to improper allocation of resources. That is, the resources do not get allocated the way they should be. That leads to market imperfections. And this is what is called as market failure. That is, the markets on their own failed to allocate the resources the way they should have been done. So, because we are talking about environmental economics, the concept of market failure remains very central to it. Because we see that in the quest for a higher economic growth, the market is not allocating the resources the way they should be. We see that how over-exploitation of natural resources is being done in order to get greater economic growth, and in this process, we are sacrificing the utility, the welfare of certain class of the society. So, market failure, I again repeat, is a situation when the markets on their own are not allocating the resources either for production or for consumption in an efficient manner, because of which the utility, the satisfaction or the uses of resources is inefficient. So let us now formally define market failure. Market failure is said to occur when the markets fail to allocate scarce resources to generate greatest social welfare. That is, we are talking about those resources which are scarce. When we started the course of environmental economics, in the very first lecture only we have said that human wants are unlimited, whereas the availability of resources is limited. That is, the resources are scarce. Similarly, we have talked about the limits to growth. We have talked about the finite availability of resources, whether it is renewable, non-renewable, there is a limit to which we can use resources. So, when markets fails to allocate these scarce resources in such a way that they generate greatest social welfare, we say the markets have failed or the market failure has occurred. Market failure occurs when freely functioning market operating without government intervention fail to deliver an efficient or optimal allocation of resources. That is, we are saying that if there is an invisible hand principles, if we believe that the markets are efficient enough to distribute resources in their best possible way without anyone intervening in the market through policies, then when such markets operate, they are freely functioning, there is no intervention of the government through any policy, but these freely functioning markets also are not able to deliver the efficient allocation or optimum allocation of resources, a market failure occurs. Therefore, because there is inefficient or suboptimal allocation of resources, economic and social welfare may not be maximized. So when the economic and social welfare is not maximized, it leads to loss of allocative efficiency and productive efficiency. That is, the first two conditions of Pareto optimality with respect to exchange and with respect to production both get violated. So a failure of the market to allocate its resources efficiently is leading to loss of economic welfare and loss of social welfare. Hence, the task of environmental economists is to identify these market failure and then suggest policy measures so that the reallocation of resources is done in such a way that we get economic as well as social welfare. Now, when market failure occurs, it can be said that there is inefficient allocation of resources. When there is inefficient allocation of resources, it will lead to production inefficiency and it may also lead to allocative inefficiency. Maybe production efficiency would mean that those goods which are being produced are produced either more than required or less than required. So we are breaking the optimum level of production because the market is failing, market is guiding to use our resources, whatever labor and capital we are producing, in such a way that it itself is leading to either higher production of undesirable goods or a lower production of desirable goods. Not only it leads to higher production of indesirable goods, it is also leading to inefficient prices. So either prices would be more or prices would be less. Similarly, it also leads to allocative inefficiency because it means that people who desire goods which are more environmental friendly, these goods are not allocated to them. So the consumer choices are also getting violated when a market failure occurs. So a market failure means suboptimal or unoptimal allocation of resources, because of which a productive inefficiency is occurring as well as allocative efficiency is occurring. Now, why does this occur is a very important question. We have talked about Pareto optimality. We have said that if the markets are perfect, if people have perfect knowledge, then markets will automatically allocate goods in such a way that the social welfare increases. But in practical life, we see that market fails. And what are the reasons for this market failure? We will be discussing these 4 reasons one by one: imperfect market, imperfect information, public goods and externalities. So we'll discuss all of them one by one. Let us start with the first reason because of which the market fails, that is the imperfect markets. What do you mean by imperfect market? When we talked about Pareto optimality, we had said that we are assuming that there is perfect competition. Perfect competition means that there are no barriers to entry and exit. The goods which are being produced are perfectly homogeneous. And there is complete knowledge to both consumers as well as producers. So when this kind of a market is there, the prices of the goods in this market is determined by demand and supply. That is, the market demand, which is downward sloping, and market supply, which is upward sloping. An equilibrium of demand and supply will determine this equilibrium price. And whoever is selling, whichever seller is selling this good, will be selling at this price P. So nobody has a market power. So everybody is going to sell at this price P. Also, if the firms are wanting to maximize their profits, we say the condition is that their marginal revenue should be equal to marginal cost. Since in perfect competition, marginal revenue is equal to price, this would mean that price will be equal to marginal cost. So there will not be any excess price. So in perfect competition, one, the price is determined by the interaction of market forces, that is demand is equal to supply. And second, the price also becomes equal to the marginal cost, because in perfect competition, price is the same as marginal revenue, and firms want to maximize profit. That becomes a point where their marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Since MR is equal to P, and P then becomes equal to MC. So in perfect competition, the price becomes equal to marginal cost. So that is the assumption by which we are talking about Pareto optimality. But what we are saying is that in case of imperfect market, that is, imperfect market means that the seller or the buyer has some kind of market power, because of which they can influence the market price. What market power? For example, if there is only one seller in the market, or for example, there are very few sellers in the markets, then this seller is powerful enough to influence the market price, because he knows consumer does not have a choice. So he can decide the price in the market. Similarly, many times buyers can also influence the market power. Let us assume there are very few buyers. Now these buyers will dominate the market, and then the price will be fixed in the market. So in case of imperfect market, unlike the perfect market, because there is market power of the buyers or the sellers, the price is not determined only by the demand and supply. Also, in imperfect market, what happens is that the price set by the market is greater than their marginal cost. So P is greater than MC, whereas here we had seen that P is equal to MC. So the price which is being set in the market is greater than the price which would have been in case of a perfect market. So because of this, what has happened is that there is a price distortion, we have just seen, and also there is resource misallocation. So either the producer will be producing goods less than what is required or more than what is required, and they will be charging a higher price than what the market should actually be charging. And this is happening because the market, in these imperfect markets, individual buyers and sellers are powerful enough to influence the market price. Let us see an example. For example, in case of oligopoly. What is an oligopoly? Oligopoly means that there are very few firms in the market, and each firm is so big in size that it can influence the market price. So once this happens, these firms know that they are dominating the market. So they have a very little incentive to offer environmentally sustainable options. Why? Because they know that they are the ones who are going to decide that how much is going to be produced and what is going to be produced. And consumers do not have a choice to move away from them. So they have a little incentive to offer environmentally sustainable options, further perpetuating the environmentally damaging consumption patterns. So because the markets were imperfect, because the sellers had a power in the market to produce what they want, they have a very little incentive to offer environmentally sustainable options, which leads to greater environmentally damaging consumption patterns. So, the market has failed to allocate the resources which was having more of environmentally sustainable options. So, that is one imperfect market reason for market failure. The second reason for having a market failure is imperfect information. What is imperfect information? When we talk about Pareto optimality, we are saying we talk about perfect competition. Now, perfect competition says that there is perfect knowledge. That is, both the consumer and the producers have complete information about whatever is happening around them. But imperfect markets also suffer from what we call as information asymmetry. That is, there is mismatch of information between the sellers and the buyers. So, asymmetrical information means that one party has more information compared to another party. Because of this imperfect information, what happens is that there may be an adverse selection or there may be a moral hazard problem. Adverse selection means because I do not know that how much environmental damage this product is making, I make a selection of that product without actually knowing or having the complete information. So maybe I am a consumer who wants to have more sustainable products, but because the information provided to me by the seller is less than what he should have given me, it leads to adverse selection. Similarly, there are a lot of moral hazard problems also, wherein intentionally certain unethical practices are done. As again I'm telling you, for many times consumer may lack complete or accurate information about environmental attributes of these products. So many times when we say that certain vegetables now these are available around the season, around the year, there are no more seasonal vegetables, we buy those without understanding that how much pesticides have been used on them just because we want to have that vegetable all around the year. So since we do not have that complete information, we buy that. So hence we are contributing to unsustainable consumption practices. So because of this, because consumers lack complete information and not only complete but accurate information, this leads to consumption of environmentally hazardous goods. Also, imperfect information leads to lower demand of environmentally friendly products than it would have been if the consumers had complete information. Because certain information is hidden from them, or it is camouflaged from them, or very smartly worded information is given, consumers have incomplete information. So even if they want, the demand for environmentally friendly products is lower. On the other hand, products that are less environmentally friendly are marketed in such a way that they enjoy a higher demand. And this also leads to market distortions. So, imperfect information, which happens because basically one party has a greater information than the other party. And they are withholding this information from the consumers. Hence, it leads to adverse selection. It also leads to moral hazards, and hence there is a consumption pattern where environmental friendly products are demanded less compared to those goods which they would have otherwise taken if they had complete information about the environmental damage these products are making. So hence it leads to what we call as a market failure. Another important reason for market failure is the goods being environmental goods, particularly being what we classify as public goods. Of course, we will be having one full lecture on public goods, but let me just give you a brief on what is public goods. As I said, environmental goods and services possess the features of a public good. What is a public good? The characteristics of the public good, one is what is called as non-excludability. Excluding means we can keep someone away from the consumption of that good. But non-excludability means that individuals cannot be excluded from its usage. That is, you cannot disallow someone to breathe clean air. Right? You cannot say to someone, since you are not paying for clean air, you are not allowed to do that. Or you cannot say that the national defense or the law and order being maintained by the government, someone who is not willing to pay for it or someone who is not paying for it cannot take the advantage of that national defense. So non-excludability means that we cannot disallow people from using that product just because they are not paying for it. And because of that, we come to a very peculiar term which is called as a free rider. Free rider means that someone is consuming that good without actually paying for that good. So, for example, conservation of natural resources in order to, for example, wildlife habitats or endangered species, because we want to maintain the biodiversity and the ecosystem. So, all those who may not be interested in this maintenance of these natural resources are still taking the advantage of having a balanced ecosystem, because we are unable to exclude them from this service. So a very peculiar feature of a public good is that of non-exclusion. The second feature of a public good is that they are non-rival in consumption. That is, consumption by one person does not prevent the consumption of another person. For example, clean air. If I am inhaling clean air, it doesn't mean that you cannot, because it is available to everyone. So consumption of one does not reduce the availability of clean air. Hence, we cannot prevent someone else from consuming this. So when any good or a service has both of these features, that is of non-exclusion and of non-rivalry, we say that that good is called as a public good. So non-exclusion means you cannot exclude someone from the usage of a good or a service, even if he or she is unwilling to pay for that product. On the other hand, non-rival means that consumption of one person of that good or a service does not prevent the consumption of another person, because it does not reduce the availability of that good or service for the rest of them. So these are non-rival in consumption. So when both of these are there, we call it as a public good. As we just said, that because there is non-exclusion, there is a very peculiar problem of a public good which is called as a free rider. Who are free riders? Free riders are all those people who are not willing to pay for a particular good, but they would benefit from it if it were offered as a public good. Okay, for example, I say I do not need any, so many security guards in my residential colony. So I will not like to pay for those services of the security guards. But since if the government is providing you that, it is offered as a public good, and I am taking the benefit of that without actually paying for it. So a free rider problem suggests that what would happen if the government stopped producing public goods? For example, government says, okay, if you're not willing to pay for law and order, we will stop having these police, we will stop having national defense. Then this would mean that many people, because they are refusing to pay, these services would be eliminated from the system, because no private individual or no private producer will be willing to provide that service without getting any compensation. So when people refuse to pay for consumption of a service or a good, and if the government says that we will not provide it anymore, that particular good or service will be totally eliminated from the system. So free rider problem, because of this, we see most of the goods and services of such types are then generated or taken care by the government. Therefore, they are also called as public goods. That is, these goods are being taken as a public service. Further, the next reason for an imperfect market is having externalities. What is externalities? Externalities are the effect of a decision on a third party that is not taken into account by the decision maker. That is, if I am doing something today and it has an impact on a third party and he is nowhere into this decision making, that is called as an externality. For example, I decide to have a DJ system in my party at my home, and I have taken decision to play it at a very high volume, because of which if the society, the neighbors around me are getting disturbed, that is an externality that I'm producing because I have not taken the consent of that third party in taking this decision. So externalities are the effect of a decision on a third party that is not taken into account by the decision maker. That is, the decision maker is not considering that my decision, what impact it is going to have on a third party. When such a market outcome affects parties other than the buyers and sellers in the market, the side effects which are created are called as externality. So, we have taken as a decision to do something. As a buyer and seller, this is my decision. Let us say I started producing paper. So, I have a paper mill. I start producing paper, so there is an agreement between I am a seller of that paper, there is a buyer of that paper, but I am also, there are certain industrial effluents in this whole production process of papers, which I'm discharging in a nearby stream, and because of that, someone else is using that stream water for the purpose of, let us say, bathing or for washing clothes, and because of which they have certain chemical reactions, it is an externality to that third party. Because these buyers and sellers have decided to produce something without taking into consideration what impact it is going to have on the third party. So such side effects on the third party are called as externalities. When these externalities occur, society's interest in the market outcome extends beyond the well-being of the buyers and sellers in the market. Of course, by buying paper and selling paper, there is certain economic transaction which is taking place. There may be certain satisfaction of wants which leads to a well-being. But because of this externality, this market outcome is not only getting restricted to these buyers and sellers, because its impact of the effluent which is being discharged in the water stream nearby is having an impact on those people who were nowhere associated with this buying and selling of paper. So, in the presence of externalities, society's interest in the market extends beyond what is happening to the well-being of the buyers and sellers. And then these externalities can be either positive, they can be or negative. Let us have a look at what do we mean by negative externalities, and then we will understand what is a positive externality. Negative externalities are basically the cost to some other people. Okay, if because of my action there is certain damage to someone, some cost is getting associated of my production or my consumption, that is called as a negative externality. For example, pollution, noise, traffic jams, there are typical examples of negative externality from our everyday life. Negative externalities lead to market failure. Why? Because sometimes the production or consumption of these goods which are causing externalities, they lead to production of larger quantities than what is socially desirable. Because they are creating social cost, we are not taking into account the social cost. While deciding how much to produce, the producer is only taking the private cost of production of that good. He is not taking into consideration that what is happening to the society because of the action of the production that I am doing. Hence, the social cost is different from the private cost, and it leads to large production of this, overproduction of these goods. Now, what are positive externalities? They are just opposite of the negative externalities. These externalities benefit some other people. Therefore, they are called as positive externalities. If because of my action, whatever production or consumption I'm doing, there is a positive impact on the society, on a third party, it is called as a positive externality. Now, these are unpaid benefits. Why? Because whoever is getting benefited because of the consumption, the third party getting benefited of this, is not paying for this. Neither they are directly involved in the production or consumption of this. These are just the unpaid benefits. So, unpaid benefits leads to the divergence between the marginal social cost and the marginal private cost, or the benefit, social benefit and the private benefit. Some of the examples of positive externalities can be immunization. For example, if we are taking vaccination against a communicable disease, and because of that I am not spreading this disease to a third party, it is a positive externality. Similarly, technological research and scientific research. We are not paying for that research, but benefits I am acquiring as a third party. Trash collection is also an example of a positive externality. Now, let me, before going further, let us do a small quiz which will help you to recap this concept. It's a small multiple choice quiz. You have to pick up the right answer. The first question is that a market failure is when a markets enable buyers to gain utility. Second is markets fail to enable sellers to make profit. Third is markets fail to allocate resources efficiently. And then markets enable producers to take risks. So if we have to define market failure, what will be market failure apart from all of these options? Is it a market enabling buyer to gain utility? Is it a market failing to enable sellers to make profit? Or is it market failing to allocate resources efficiently? Or is it markets enabling producers to take risk? Market failure is when markets fail to allocate resources efficiently. That is, when the markets are not allotting the resources efficiently because there is a gap between what is desired and what is happening to actual allocation. Second question is, which of the following is an example of negative externality? We have just understood what are externalities. Is it a beekeeper providing pollination services to nearby farms? Is it a factory emitting pollutants into the air and water? Is it a homeowner installing solar panels to generate electricity? Or is it a consumer purchasing a smartphone? Which of the following options is an example of negative externality? A beekeeper providing pollination services to nearby farms? B, a factory emitting pollutants into the air and water? C, a homeowner installing solar panels to generate electricity? Or D, a consumer producing a smartphone? What will be an example of negative externality out of these four? The answer would be B. That is, a factory is emitting pollutants into the air and water. A will be an example of positive externality. C will also be an example of positive externality. So, this is just a quiz to refresh your knowledge of whatever we have done. Now, let us just revise what we have done. We have understood that market failure are preventing socially efficient equilibrium from being reached, because there is a gap between what society desires to be produced and consumed and what is being actually produced and consumed. Market failure is associated, there are various reasons for market failure. It is associated with imperfect market, it is associated with externalities, it is associated with public goods, and it is associated with asymmetric information or imperfect information. Economists explain environmental degradation using this theory of market failure. primarily by identifying negative externalities and public goods. And these are the two which we are going to explain in the subsequent lectures. Both negative externalities, how do they have an impact on environment and how they can be corrected, and what are public goods we have seen, how do they lead to market failure, and then what are the consequences. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. So take care and we'll meet you in the next lecture. Thank you so much.